Christ wasn't afraid of those in great power. Wouldn't you agree that this lack of fear paved the way to get his teachings across to others? He really shook things up this way. How about something like that? That's an email. The idea of, does it seem like sometimes today we as Christians, we as Catholics are unwilling to, to fight the power, so to speak, as we hear, or to challenge the power?
Yeah, well, I think that's very true, and I think that those words of Edmund Burke, right? All that's required for evil to prevail is for a few good people to remain silent, and I think this is the truth. And what's the main cause of silence? Either fear or shame, one or the other. And Jesus had neither. I mean, essentially, not just because of his belief in the Father, but because of his awareness of the transformative power of love and the Holy Spirit that could take place. He had no fear about preaching this, right? And I don't think we should have fear. What's the worst they can do to us? Kill us, and so we enter into glory. We should have no shame about this. I mean, what is shameful about the Beatitudes? What's shameful about it? Yes, I know there are people out there who will say, you can't be humble-hearted and run a business. Oh, yes, you can. I mean, all you got, just read the vast literature of servant leadership, right? The whole idea is that humility wins the day. I mean, there's this great book. Jim Collins just wrote a book, How the Mighty Fall. That's a great book. But essentially, the theme of the book is overweening pride takes really good people and successful enterprises and trashes them. This is, so I know there are counter philosophies out there, but we have to stand up to these counter philosophies, right? And we have to look at this and just, you don't have to be a Greenleaf or a Collins, but you can say, hey, to the world, there's nothing for us to be ashamed of. Humble-heartedness will always work in the end. It's good for business, it's good for us, it's good for society. Gentle-heartedness is going to work in the end. Yeah, you got to be a tough negotiator sometimes, but at the end of the day, you can be patient with people in their weakness. You can deal with people and try to find the right fit for them. All those great principles of servant leadership. So there are counter philosophies that are out there which challenge and make us feel sometimes ashamed. But there's nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing to be ashamed of in believing in the resurrection. I mean, we've got so much good evidence to begin with. I mean, if you want to go out there and get the evidence for the resurrection, as I pointed out many shows,
right,
in this in the Father Spencer's universe, the key thing is you got these near-death experience studies, which are really great. Don't back away from them. Be like Mario Beauregard, that neuroscientist, over there at Arizona State University, who wrote that book Brain Wars. Just get out there and say, you cannot explain these things by a physiological explanation. Get over your materialism. I'm not going to be ashamed of the resurrection. You should be ashamed of your materialism. You don't have an adequate explanation for these phenomena. And certainly not a naturalistic or a physicalistic one. And by the way, the evidence for the Shroud of Turin right now, I mean, you got to be blind to investigate that evidence and not come away with thinking, right, hey, how does this happen? I mean, the evidence for the resurrection of the Shroud. But still, all of the new evidence, historical evidence for the resurrection that have been unearthed by people like N.T. Wright in his wonderful book, The Resurrection of the Son of God. Okay, you got the evidence on your side, but that's not the reason. You don't have to be ashamed of the resurrection because it looks like a crutch. You should never think that way, because for all intents and purposes, you could say that the resurrection is a crutch, but you can also say that there are two sides to the resurrection. We're the ones, Christians are the ones, that face up to the fact that there really can be eternal darkness and eternal light. And we have the awesome power of human freedom capable of choosing eternal darkness. You think our problem is we can't face death, so we invented a crutch? I'll tell you something right now. We can face the fact that there's eternal darkness out there, something you better look at because of the awesome power of your own human freedom, and you want to reconcile yourself to that and try and get into heaven. I'm not ashamed of anything. I don't feel like I've ever in any way abdicated the need for courage or the need to be honest or authentic. We Christians
do you think a lot
are
of
on
that,
the same plane.
Do you think a lot of that
Yeah.
is also the fact that if we were truly humble, we wouldn't be afraid of being embarrassed or feeling embarrassed to stand up for what the truth is, and that because we don't want to fight against peer pressure and be made to look foolish. Nobody wants to look foolish these days.
Yeah, well, I agree with that, and although it's hard to be humble sometimes, I mean, I got to be honest with you. Sometimes people walk up to me and go, rejoice with me. My new book is about to be published, and I just want to. Just want to say, my new book is going to be published too, and look how much better it is than yours. You know what I mean?
Let's compare sales later.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But we're dragged into it almost by the culture. But the one thing I always just say is, hey, don't worry about whether I believe in a crutch. You better worry about whether you believe in the truth. Whether you've made an examination, an authentic examination of the evidence and an authentic examination of yourself before you render judgment about whether I believe in a crutch. For all intents and purposes, if you can't face the truth about yourself and the truth about darkness and light, then you shouldn't be talking to me. Why pick out the splinter in my eye as a Christian when you got the big old beam sticking out of your own eye, which you can't see through?